Okay. So there we are. Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So let me start presentation. Okay. So we had started our class yesterday, or probably on Monday, na? Yeah. With what is it that we are expected to learn in this particular topic, which we are calling demand supply analysis. Sorry. So the first learning objective is to understand the concept of supply and demand. The second is, how do supply and demand forces play central role in what is called market mechanism? And what happens when certain factors change in the market, and how do they impact market equilibrium? Next, we'll talk for discussion something which is very, very important, especially for students of business management, and that is called elasticities of supply and demand. And then economists sometimes distinguish between short run and long run elasticities, and we will try and discuss those differences also. We will also try to understand and predict the effects of changing market conditions. And finally, is the impact or government intervention in the market. So these are the learning objectives of this topic. I'll quickly go through the slides that we had discussed in the last class. So the first thing that we said was that the supply demand analysis is a very powerful tool that can be applied to a wide variety of problems. First, if you want to understand and predict how changing world economic conditions affect market price and production, then look no further than supply demand analysis. This supply demand analysis will help you understand, not only understand, it will also help you predict how the changing world economic conditions affect market price and production. The second thing that we can achieve through this basics of supply and demand analysis, we can evaluate as what could possibly be the impact of government price controls, minimum wages, price supports like minimum support price, procurement price, and production incentives, for example, special economic zone. And then we can also figure out how to determine, we can also figure out how taxes, subsidies, tariffs, and import quotas affect consumers and producers. And we had given one example of subsidy, defined subsidy, tariff, taxes, import quotas, etc. in the last. Then we discussed the basic concept of supply curve. Basically, there are two things. One is what is supply, and the other is what is supply curve. These two are different things. So, what is supply? Supply is simply the willingness of the producer to supply a certain quantity of goods and services in the market at a given price. For example, if the price per unit is 10 rupees, then how many units will be supplied by the producer? If the price is 15 rupees, then how many units will be supplied by the producer? So basically, you should always remember that supply and the supply curve are two different things. First, you should know what is supply, and then you should know what is the relationship between the quantity supplied and the price of that. So, as I said, supply simply refers to the willingness of the producer to sell a certain quantity of goods and services at a given price in the market. The relationship between quantity supplied and price is positive. That is, higher the price, higher the supply, lower the price, lower the supply. But what is the precondition for this relationship to hold good? The precondition is that all other factors which impact supply should be held constant. For example, input costs. We should not allow input costs to change. For example, technology. For example, number of consumers in the market. All these things should be held constant. Of course, I understand that this is not possible, but in order to isolate the impact of price change on quantity supplied, theoretically, we will have to presume that all other factors are kept constant. So the relationship between quantity supplied and the price is shown by a positively sloped supply curve. A positively sloped supply curve. Then we also discussed the concept of shift in supply curve, either to its right or to its left. So when does the supply curve shift? Supply curve shifts when other factors change. And that is why we call the other factors shift factors. For example, input costs. If input costs fall, what will be the new supply curve? Where will the new supply curve be? Rightward or leftward as compared to the original?
The right word.
So,
Right word.
right. So if input costs fall, supply curve shift to its right. If input costs rise, then supply curve will shift to its left. Again, we will presume that all other factors are constant. If technology improves, you produce more per unit of time at same cost, then you will be able to supply more, and as a result, the supply curve will shift to its right. So this is what is supply curve, supply, and the shift in supply. This is the supply curve relationship, this one. Then we have a few factors which we are calling other variables. We are calling them other variables that affect supply. So what are they? For example, production costs, which include wages, interest, and cost of raw materials. Then when production costs decrease, output increases, no matter what the market price happens to be. The entire supply curve thus shifts to the right. So economists often use the phrase change in supply and quantity supplied, or change in quantity supplied. So when do we use the word change in supply? Change in supply. We use the term change in supply under inverted comma when supply curve shifts. But when the supply curve remains the same, but we only move along the supply curve, same supply curve, then we use the phrase change in the quantity supplied. So you just compare these two, change in supply underlined by yellow line and change in the quantity supplied underlined by the red line. So when do we refer to the phrase change in supply? When supply curve shifts. And when do we refer to change in the quantity supplied? We do not shift the supply curve, but we move along the supply curve. So that is what it is. Likewise, we have something called demand and demand curve. So we know that demand is simply willingness and ability of a buyer to purchase a certain product at a certain price. That is demand curve. Demand, not demand curve. Demand curve simply shows relationship between price of the product and the total quantity demanded, other factors remaining constant. And this relationship is negative, and we can write this relationship in this functional form. Quantity demanded is a function of price. price of the product. And this is the downward sloping demand curve, and this is the demand to its right, because other factors may have changed. For example, if you develop taste for a certain product, then the demand for that product will increase. And similarly, if price of substitute products goes up, then the demand for the product will go up. If the price of complementary products falls, then the price of the product will go up. So all those so-called shift factors will shift the demand curve, whereas if we allow only the price of the product to change, then we will move along the demand curve. So again, we will use two different phases. One will be change in demand, and the other will be change in quantity demanded. Change in quantity demanded. So when will we use the term change in demand? When the demand curve shifts. When do we use the term change in quantity demanded? When we move along the demand curve. So if you move along the demand curve like this, then it is change in quantity demanded. But when you move off it, then it is change in demand. So again, as I said, the demand curve will shift if other factors shift. And this could be because of change in the price of substitute goods, change in the price of complementary goods, and so on. So we had discussed the concept of demand and supply up to this point in our Monday's class. Now today we will combine the concept of demand and supply and see how prices and quantities are fixed in the market. So you have a demand curve and you have a supply curve, and these two curves intersect at this point. What does the intersection of the two curves indicate? Any idea?
Market equilibrium. Market equilibrium.
Sir, market equilibrium.
Couldn't get you.
Sir, optimum supply.
So market equilibrium.
Forget about demand and supply. Forget about demand and supply. Suppose you have these two lines. Suppose you have these two lines. This is line A and this is line B. And they intersect each other at point E. So what does this intersection point mean?
Surprise.
Sir, they have the common point.
Point.
Optimum demand, optimum supply.
No, it doesn't mean optimum. No.
So supply is equal to demand.
Yeah,
Both are equal.
exactly. That is what it means. So when two curves intersect, then what it means is that the value of the two are equal. So the value of A is equal to the value of B at the point of intersection. Likewise here, in the case of demand and supply, this is the point of intersection. So at this point, value of demand is equal to the value of supply. That is what it actually means. I will give you one very simple numerical example. Say, for instance, you have this is the price, this is quantity demanded, this is quantity supplied. So prices are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Quantity demanded are 100, 110, 120, 130, and 140. Likewise, here you have 140, 130, 120, 110, and then this is 100. So the question is, at what price are these two equal, quantity demanded and quantity supplied? So they are equal at price 3.
Three.
So So both are equal at price 3. So this point will be the equilibrium point at which demand is equal to supply. That is what this equilibrium point shows. And what does this P0 show? P0 shows this, that the price is 3. At this price, the demand is equal to supply. And what does this Q0 show? Q0 shows 120. That is, demand is 120, supply is also 120. So that is what it shows. Any question? So basically, what is it that I have said so far? I have said that the point at which the two curves intersect each other is the point which we call the equilibrium point. Equilibrium point. So what means to get equilibrium, to equilibrium? Equilibrium here simply means that there is a tendency not to change. There is a tendency not to change. It is a position of rest. So once you think that you are in equilibrium, then you would not like to disturb it. You would like to take rest at that point. You would not like to change it. That is what equilibrium means. So once you have equilibrium point reached, then you would like to take rest. But suppose for some reason the price is not P0. Price is not P0. Let us say that price is P1. Let's say price is P1. And see what happens at P1 price. When price is P1, you have to figure out what is the level of demand and what is the level of supply. So here at this price, that price P1, the quantity demanded is 110. What is the supply? At P1, the supply is 140. So which is more, supply or demand?
Sir, supply.
Supply, sir.
So when supply is greater than demand, what do we call this situation? We call it surplus. That is, there is a surplus supply in the market. There is a surplus supply in the market. So at P1 price, how many units of the product will remain unsold?
So 30 units.
30 units will remain unsold. Now, when the producers find that there are unsold units and it is unnecessarily increasing the inventory or stock of the product in their godowns or in their warehouses, what would they do?
Sir,
Decrease
lower
the
the
price
They
of
would
price.
decrease the price.
So, as you must have seen on Amazon, etc., they sometimes say clearance sale. Clearance sale means they will mark down the price so that their surplus supply can be sold in the market. So that is how prices will then start to fall. Prices will then start to fall and it keeps falling till it reaches the equilibrium level. That is P0. Till it reaches the equilibrium level P0. And once it reaches the equilibrium level, what do you find? The entire surplus has been sold and there is no more surplus in the market. Demand is equal to the supply. Right? What if the price is less than P0? What if it is P2? Let us find out what is the supply and what is the demand. Here at P2, the supply is say 110, and at P2 the demand is 140. So this time there is an excess demand of 30 units. And this thing, when demand is greater than supply, then what do we call this situation? We call it shortage. That is supply shortage. So basically the term shortage and surplus refer to the situation relating to supply. When we use the term surplus, it means the supply is in surplus. When we use the term shortage, it means that the supply is in shortage. So when the producers will notice that there is more demand for their product in the market than what they are selling or supplying, what will they do?
Increase the price to P0.
Increase the price.
The price increase.
They will start raising the price, and they will keep raising it. They will keep raising it till it reaches P0. At again P0, what do we notice? The demand is again equal to supply. So this is how, if you allow prices to change in the market, then surpluses or shortages will be corrected in due course of time. This is something which is very important. No. Can you recall what is the last thing that I just said? What is it that I said last? It was the what is the last thing that I said? I said that if prices are flexible, that is, if prices are allowed to go up and down in response to demand and supply, then the market will eventually reach equilibrium. To start with, you may have a surplus supply, but you will eventually go back to equilibrium. To start with, you may have shortages of supply, but eventually you will go back to equilibrium. And what will bring the market back into equilibrium? Prices. But this price can bring the market back to equilibrium only if prices are flexible. If prices are not flexible, then you will have to live with disequilibrium. You have to live with disequilibrium. That is, what if P1 cannot fall to P0? What if P2 cannot go up to P0? In that case, surplus will remain surplus, shortage will remain shortage. So that is the point. So most economists, whom we call classical economists or neoclassical economists, assume that prices are flexible. But one great economist who has reinvented economics, called John Maynard Keynes, presumes that prices are rigid, at least in the short run. You cannot change prices very quickly in the short run. That is what his assumption is. And that is why Keynes said that in the short run, you will have a situation where the market is not in equilibrium, or the market, even if you call it equilibrium, the market is not in actual equilibrium. If you opt for macroeconomics as an elective course later on in the program, probably in the fourth or fifth trimester. Then we will discuss more about these phenomenon. But right. So this is about mechanism. Now, so we used certain terms and we will simply define them. Equilibrium refers to price, or equilibrium price refers to a price that equates to quantity supplied and quantity demanded. We are also calling it market clearing because if there is a surplus, you will lower the price and the market will clear. If there is a shortage, you will raise the price and the market will clear. Then market mechanism is a tendency in a free market for prices to change until the market clears. So market mechanism presumes that price can change. But if you do not allow prices to change, then the market mechanism will fail. Then third, surplus refers to a situation in which supply is more than demand, and shortage refers to a situation where demand exceeds supply. I hope this is pretty clear. Then, when can we use the supply-demand model? We are assuming that at any given price, a given quantity will be produced and sold. This assumption makes sense only if a market is at least roughly competitive. Now, what do we mean by a competitive market? What do we mean by a competitive market?
It's a large number of buyers and large number of sellers.
That's true, but actually that is only one of the features of a competitive market. Normally, competitive markets are defined in a totally different way. So I'll show you how it is defined. This is how it is defined. A market is called competitive when both buyers and sellers have little market power. That is, they cannot individually change the market price. So, for example, if you go to a market to buy vegetables, can you alone, with your action, change the price of vegetables? Let's say cauliflower or say ladyfinger. Can you change the price on your own? You are only one of the millions of consumers buying vegetables in the market, and therefore you are not powerful enough to change the price on your own. Likewise, instead of being a consumer of vegetables, suppose you are a seller of vegetables, and then there are millions of sellers of vegetables. Can a vegetable seller influence the price of vegetables in the market on his or her own? Can you insist on selling your cauliflower at a price which is 30-20% higher than what the market is asking for? Nobody will buy it from, because everyone else is selling the same stuff as you are selling. So basically what I'm saying is that competitive market refers to a situation where both buyers and sellers have little market power or absolutely nil market power. That is, they have no ability individually to affect the market price. They cannot change it. That is what we call competitive market. But imagine a market where there is only a single seller of a product. What do we call such a market?
Monopoly.
Monopoly. In a monopoly, what do you think is the market power of the monopolist? Does he have some market power or no market power?
So can you repeat the question?
So I guess the price as
Has
per
absolute market power.
So basically the question is, if you happen to be the sole supplier of a product, then can you impact or to change on your own? You
Yes, sir.
can. You happen to be the
Yes, sir.
sole supplier. For example, let us say railway services in India. Who else lets you travel by rail? No one else does. Indian Railways is the only provider of railway services in India. So if they are charging 3,000 rupees per passenger for letting them travel to Ranchi from Delhi in a particular train, tomorrow they can say that we will charge 3,500 rupees per passenger for the same journey. And if you wish to travel, you will have to pay 3,500. If you think you cannot afford to pay 3,500, then you will have to postpone your journey. You will have to cancel your journey. There is absolutely no way out. So what I'm saying is that a competitive market happens to be a market where individually you have no ability to influence the market price. But a market which is monopoly happens to be a market which is not competitive because a single seller can influence the price. So that is what I meant by competitive. So remember that this which I said a little while ago, that initially if there is disequilibrium in the market, then the market will have a tendency to go back to equilibrium provided prices are allowed to change. And prices will change only if the market is competitive. If it is not competitive, then that will not happen. Suppose that supply were controlled by a single producer. If the demand curve shifts in a particular way, it may be in a monopolist's interest to keep the quantity fixed, but change the price, or keep the price fixed and change the quantity. Now, look at this particular thing very carefully, the last sentence which we have written. Now, I will try to illustrate this thing. Suppose you have this position to start with. This is quantity demanded and supplied. This is price. This is demand. And this is supply. Originally, price is P0, quantity is Q0. Okay? Now, read this one. If the demand curve shifts in a particular way, that is, it may shift to its right or it may shift to its left, it may be in the monopolist's interest to keep the quantity fixed, but change the price. So let us say demand shifts from D to D1. Demand shifts from D to D1. And the supply curve remains the same, because the monopolist can keep the supply fixed. The monopolist may say, I'm not going to change my supply. So what will happen? Quantity supplied remains Q0. And what happens to the new price now? The new price becomes P1. So that is why we are saying that if the demand curve shifts in a particular way, it may be in the monopolist's interest to keep the quantity fixed. Quantity is still fixed at Q0, but let the price change from P0 to P1. Or to keep the price fixed and change the quantity. To keep the price fixed and change the quantity. What does that mean? So let me try to show that. Okay, so this is the original one. Now, if the monopolist wants to keep the price fixed, So demand curve has shifted to its right. Demand curve has shifted to its right from D to D1. It wants to keep the price fixed. It wants to keep the price fixed. That is, what will happen to the quantity now? Quantity. So monopolist can keep the price fixed and change the quantity from Q0 to Q1. So the point that we are trying to emphasize is that if you do not have competitive market, then it is quite possible that monopolist may keep either quantity fixed but change the price, because it can change the price, because it has the power to change the price, or it can keep the price fixed because it has the power to let the price not change but can change the quantity. So basically what we are trying to suggest here, whatever we have discussed in the last slide regarding equilibrium of demand and supply will apply only if the market is roughly competitive. Even if it is not fully competitive, it should be roughly competitive, which means that no individual buyer or no individual seller should be in a position to influence the quantity supplied and the prices charged in the market. Okay. So now, next thing that we would like to see is changes in market equilibrium. Now, what will happen to the market equilibrium if supply curve shifts? If supply curve shifts. Now, look at this particular caption. New equilibrium following shift in supply. So, when can supply curve shift either to its right or to its left? When other factors change. Let us presume that input costs have fallen. Material has become cheaper. Wages have fallen because of surplus workers. So in that case, input costs have fallen and supply curve will then shift to its right. The supply curve shift to its right. Now, notice the change in the equilibrium. Earlier, the equilibrium was at point A. But now, the equilibrium is at point B. So how have things changed from A to B? At A, prices were higher, that is P1, and quantity supplied is smaller, that is Q1. But as a result of shift in the supply curve to its right, without any change in demand curve, what has happened? Prices have fallen from P1 to P3, and the quantity has changed from Q1 to Q3. So what is the conclusion that you can draw? What is the conclusion that you can draw? What is the conclusion that you can draw? That when supply curve shifts to its right and demand curve remains the same, then price falls, quantity increases. This is the conclusion that you draw. Next, what is the caption? What will happen if demand curve shifts but supply curve remains the same? You can also work it out on your piece of paper, but here to save time, let us say the demand curve has shifted to its right. Let's say because of increase in the income of the consumer. Let us say that GDP of the country has gone up and the government and private sector employers have started paying more salaries and people have started earning more income. So consumers have become better off in terms of income, and as a result, demand has shifted to its right. But supply curve has remained the same. Let us presume it. So what will happen now? So previously, equilibrium was at point A, is point B. So earlier prices were lower at P1, quantity is smaller at Q1. Now, as a result of increase in demand from D to D dash, prices have gone up from P1 to P3, and the demand has also gone up, or quantity gone from Q1 to Q3. So that is what it means. And you can always work it out on the basis of keeping one curve constant, changing the other curve, and then you can also bring the two curves together and you can say that, okay, let's change both of them. Let's change both of them. Equilibrium following shifts in both supply curve and demand curve. So here it is, the supply curve has shifted and then the demand curve has also shifted. And what do you notice as a result of a simultaneous shift in the demand and the supply curve? That prices have gone up, quantity has also gone up. But you will notice that it is not compulsory that price will go up. What if demand curve shifts, but shifts not by as much as it has shifted in this diagram? What if the demand curve shifts here? What if the demand curve shifts here? In this case, quantity will change to, let's say, Q0, but price remains at P0. So price has not changed. Basically, whether price or quantity will change as a result of a simultaneous shift in the demand and the supply curve depends on the extent of shift in the supply and demand curve. How much have you shifted the demand curve and how much have you shifted the supply curve will determine by how will prices and quantity will change, or whether they will change at all or not. So that is what this basically means. And you, as a homework, you can just try different combinations. Change one curve, leave the other unchanged. Then change the other curve, leave the one unchanged, first one unchanged. Then shift both the curve, shift both the curves in unequal quantity. Then shift both the curves in equal quantity, shift them left, shift them right. So in this way, you will be able to figure out a lot of things. Okay, so this is what we just wanted to say. Now, to give you one simple short story which relates to prices of eggs and price of college education, and the period is 1970 to 2007. And we are saying that this price is the real price. It is inflation adjusted price. So what it says is that from 1970 to 2007, that is a period of almost 37 years, price of eggs in America fell by 49%. Can you believe it? That egg prices fell. Whereas the real price of college education rose by 105%. That is, education became costlier by almost 2 times than what it was in 1970 as compared to what it was in 2007, whereas the price of eggs fell half in 7 as compared to 70. Now, can you think of the reason behind it? In terms of the demand-supply framework, in terms of the demand-supply framework, so let us start by first analyzing the egg pricing. It fell 49% over a period of 37 years. What could have led to this fall in egg price? Of course, it could have. It is a result of change in the demand and supply conditions. It is a result of change in the demand and supply conditions. So what you have to do is you have to draw a diagram. You have to draw a diagram. Here you have prices of eggs, and here you have quantity of eggs. This is the original demand curve for egg, and this is the original supply curve for eggs. Price was, let us say, $1, and the size, say, 10 million units of eggs. Now, supply and demand must have shifted to bring about a fall in the price from $1 to 51 cents, because price has fallen by 49%. So now the price has fallen to 51 cents. Now this 51 cents is the new price. This is the new price here. For this, what must have happened? For this, what must have happened? Supply must have gone up manyfold. Supply must have gone up manyfold. And demand actually should have fallen. Demand should have actually fallen. So that your new equilibrium is here. This is your new equilibrium point. And this was your old equilibrium point. So the green dot suggests the new equilibrium point where you are consuming more eggs than before, but at a lower price of 51 cents. But at a lower price of 61 cents. So what has happened? It has happened so that the supply has gone up manyfold over the last 37 years. What could have led to this surge in supply is another thing to study. But this is what must have happened on the basis of the demand-supply framework. Supply must have gone up manyfold, and demand, on the other hand, must have shifted to its left. Otherwise, the prices wouldn't have fallen. So, if we go through the remaining part of the particular slide, you will get a sense of why the demand curve may have shifted to its left and why the supply curve may have shifted to its right. So, let us just see that. Let us see what is written here. This is an explanation of the increase in the supply, that is, shift in the supply curve to its right. Mechanization of poultry farms sharply reduce the cost of producing eggs, shifting the supply curve downwards. Downwards means rightwards. Demand curve for eggs, on the other hand, shifted to the left. Why? Because people became more health conscious, and then they tended to avoid eggs. I'm a vegetarian. I do not eat eggs. No idea about eggs at all. But I was told that egg is a very rich source of protein. So people should take eggs. And this National Egg Council had some time ago up with some slogan also, an egg a day keeps doctor away, something like that. But I'm not very sure about that. Now, so in America, the population tended to avoid eggs because they became more health conscious. So therefore, the demand curve shifted to its left. And the mechanization of poultry farms reduced the cost of producing eggs, reducing eggs, which led to shifting the supply curve rightwards. And that is how it happened. Prices of egg fell and the total supply of eggs increased over a period of 37 years. Now, can you then try and figure out why college education may have gone up, or price of college education may have gone up? I'm sure you'll be able to. Yeah, why?
people may have realized the importance of education, that education is important.
And
also helps students to make his career and earn money to
good.
fulfill his livelihood.
So as a result of such a thinking, what must have happened to the demand curve for
So demand actually,
Demand might have risen and the supply, like the number of colleges, they might have been same. And because the demand increased, so the fees increased.
Sir,
So
people
actually, you have to answer it in terms of the shift of the demand curve. So as a result of this thinking that education is the answer for removing your poverty, to make your career, earn income, then lead a good, comfortable life. When you started thinking along these lines, then what happened to the demand
Sir,
curve?
sir,
Yeah.
sir, the number of students are more than the number of institute in the country.
Yeah, so basically this is the answer, but you have to answer it in terms of demand supply framework. So demand curve for education shifted
More than
where
the number of institute, rising in the number of institute.
shifted the right or to the left.
Sir, to the right.
So demand curve for education shifted to the right.
Yes, sir.
What about supply curve? Supply
Sir,
curve for
supply.
education.
Sir, supply might have also increased, but the percentage was less than the demand.
Very good. Excellent answer. So both have shifted. Both have shifted rightwards. But the shift in demand is more than the shift in supply, leading to a net increase in the price of education. So if we draw a curve to show this, how will we do it? This is price of education. This is quantity of education. This is demand curve for education. This is supply curve for education. Original price is this much, P1. This is Q1. Now demand has shifted a lot to the right. So this is D at 1. Supply has also gone up, but supply has not been able to keep pace with demand. So the price has gone up from P1 to P2, even though demand supply has also gone up from Q1 to Q2. So you have to notice these 2 points, this green dot, which is the original one, and this pink dot, which is the new one. So the new one clearly means that both have shifted to their right, where the extent of shift in the demand curve is far more pronounced than the extent of shift in the supply curve. So what is it that I'm trying to convey to you? I'm only trying to convey to you is that everything that you find in terms of price or quantity can be explained in terms of framework, demand and supply. It is such a powerful tool. Is this clear? In the next slide, we will show these 2 things graphically, but here is the explanation of increase in the real price of college education, 105%. As for college, increases in the costs of equipping and maintaining modern classrooms, laboratories, and libraries, along with increased faculty salaries, push the supply curve up. The demand curve shifted to the right as a large percentage of a growing number of school graduates, high school graduates, decided that a college education was essential. So therefore, both shifted to their right, but problem was the demand shifted more than supply. So this is the diagram to show egg prices phenomenon. So supply curve shifts, demand curve shifts to its left, price falls from 61 to 31 cents, and demand rises from 5,300 to 7,400. This is what I showed you earlier. Likewise, this is the one for college education. So the original price for college education in terms of annual cost in $1970 is $2,530. And how many students were enrolled? 6.9 million students were enrolled. That is 69 lakh students were studying college in US in 1970. 7 is down line. The supply curve has shifted to its left. This has not happened in India. In India, education has gone, the quantity of education has increased by leaps and bounds. There are, I suppose you may be knowing, 400 universities in India. Roughly 40,000 colleges are enrolled, are affiliated with these 400 universities. Today, if you go back 50 years, I think it was not even 20% or 15% of what it is today. So India has increased its quantity, but quality is a big, big concern. We still are not being able to impart high quality education. And there are no more 5, 7 high quality educational institutions in our country for all kinds of professional and technical education like engineering, medicine, law, and management, etc. Okay, so then you can just notice the kind of shift which has taken place in the demand for education. Huge. And as a result, what has happened to the price? The price of education has gone more than 2 times, from 25.30 to 51.95. And mind it, this is not because of inflation, because this inflation has already been adjusted from the price, and we are only talking about the real price. It's gone up 105%. And today, how many students are enrolled? 14.8. There's 1,48 lakh students are studying in college. I mean, that was in 2007. In 2020, things must have gone up a lot after that. So this is what I wanted to tell you in terms of demand supply model. It's a very, very powerful tool. And in this particular presentation, there are a few more examples which I would not like to take up unnecessary. That is unnecessary. So I'll skip all these things. This is
So,
I'll skip this. Yeah.
sir, I had a question here. Like, since the costs of the maintaining the classrooms went up, so the supply curve actually goes not towards the right, but it goes towards the left, right?
So what is your question?
No, sir. I was confused in that, because I was thinking like it should go towards the left only. So it's going towards left. Yes, sir.
No. Okay, I'll give you one example. Think of 2 different kinds of colleges in India: medical colleges and management colleges. Which type of college education is expanded and which type of college education has not?
So management has expanded and medical has not.
Why?
So because of the demand.
What do you think? Demand for medical education? Yes. Lakhs of students appear in need to take admission in very few available seats in medical colleges in India. Why has medical college in India not gone up?
So because of the infrastructure, they don't have that type of infrastructure.
Why don't they have that kind of infrastructure?
Sir, the government wants to put a barrier that this many 100 doctors will be produced in a particular year. limit
No,
the.
no, there is
Sir, lack of resources.
There is no such barrier. I am not aware of any such barrier that the government says that no more than 10,000 or 10 lakh doctors will be produced in India. I don't think so.
Okay, sir. I thought just like in CA, in this case also it might be the case. That's why.
CA is almost
To
free
maintain quality education.
to maintain quality. Okay. Basically, the cost of establishing a management school is just a fraction of the cost of establishing a medical college. In order to establish a medical college, you will have to probably invest in 200, 300, 500 crores. But to start a college of management, you can start it for roughly 5 to 10 crores. Now, question is, why the college of medical colleges has not gone up? Because of cost reasons. Because the costs have gone up manifold of medical equipment and land. And land, I mean, common to all kinds of colleges and educational institutions. But basically, the cost of imparting medical education is a lot higher than even cost of imparting engineering education. Engineering colleges numbers have also gone up quite substantially. So don't necessarily force yourself into thinking that the supply curve of education has shifted to its left. It may have shifted to its right, because in the last 50 years, the number of medical colleges has also gone up in India. That has also gone up in India, which means that the supply curve has also gone up, has shifted to its right. But the problem is that there is so much of shortage of doctors in India that the demand for medical education is 100 times more than the seats available for medical education. And that is why the price of getting medical education in India has gone up substantially. So the demand curve has shifted maybe 300% right. Supply curve may have shifted to its right, but maybe just 20% or maybe 10%. So you need not necessarily shift the supply curve to its left to come up with this kind of a conclusion. You can come up with this kind of a conclusion even if the supply curve has shifted to its right, but the only thing that is required for this conclusion is that the extent of shift in the college education supply curve is less than the extent of shift in college education demand curve. That's the point.
Demand. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Okay. Yeah.
Sir, I had a question. Like the example, the egg one example, the example which you showed for the egg supply. Sir, one thing I wanted to ask, like if the supply increases, then the price will fall automatically. But then why we are showing that the demand also came down? Because if the supply increases, the prices will come down automatically. So why need to show that demand also came down?
No. Look, supply and demand, they are two separate things. Supply curve may shift because of one or the other factor. Demand curve may shift because of one or the other factor, which is not same as the supply curve. So let us say input costs have fallen, due to which the supply curve shifts. Simultaneously, the income of the consumers may have gone up, because of which the demand curve shifts. So both can shift.
Oh, okay.
Any other question?
Yes, sir. Prince this side.
Yeah.
Sir, in early slide you discussed about the supply curve shifted and the cows is to decrease in price. So same thing is applied in monopoly market, sir.
Yeah, monopoly actually what it means is that if you can control the price of a product, then you will be considered as monopolist, or monopoly-like producer, if not truly monopolist. So basically, Monopolist controlling the price of a product is one thing, but the supply curve shifting to the right or to the left is a different thing. The supply curve shifts not because of the action of the monopolist, but because of the action beyond the control of the monopolist. For example, say railway services. Now, railway is a monopolist in India. What will we say if the railway is unable to increase the supply of the rail services in India? What would you say? It means that they do not have resources to press into service more trains for commuters to use. They can increase the price or reduce the price whenever they want to, but they cannot increase the supply whenever they want to. They can reduce the supply whenever they want to. They can cancel major trains. For example, during the lockdown, the railway stopped providing services, so they provided 0 services. But what if today they are providing, say, let us say 5,000 trains? What if they are asked to provide another 2,000 trains? Can they do so right away? Cannot do so, because that is something beyond the control of the monopolist. So remember, there are two different things. One is moving up and down along the curve. The other is shifting the curve. Moving up and down is within the control of the monopolist. But shifting the curve is not within the power of the monopolist, except that it can shift the curve to its left, but not to its right. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any more questions? Any more questions? So we will stop our discussion at this point today. In tomorrow's or next class, we will discuss what is called elasticity of demand. We will discuss elasticity of demand. I think I have already shared this presentation with you in your Google Classroom, and you can just go through the concept of elasticity before you attend your class next Monday. That would help you understand the concepts a little more better. So if you have any more questions, you're most welcome. And
Sir, you haven't shared the presentation.
sorry?
Sir, you haven't shared the presentation.
This one, I think I had, no? Okay, if I have not, then I'll share it today. Okay, then I'll share it today. I had shared some presentations yesterday, that was the recordings of the class. One recording that happened on 27th of August. The recording is with me, but I'm unable to share it because the ownership has still not been transferred to me. So I'll request each one of you, all 110 students or 109 students present in the class, to please check your drive, Google Drive, and see whether you are the owner of the class recording which happened on 27th August. If that is so, please transfer the ownership to me so that I can share it with everyone. I have already requested each one of you through a message on Google Classroom. I have sent a separate message to Suman Kumari for identifying who is the owner of that particular, class recording, and she has said that she will get back to me within a couple of days. You can also help her and me by checking your Google Drive whether you are the owner of the recording that happened on 27th. If that is so, then I'll be able to share it with you. The remaining classes I have already shared. You can check your Google Drive. You can check your classroom. I have taken attendance. If you wish to leave now, you can. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
चलो
Thank you,
थैंक यू
sir.
सर
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Vinay Kumar
Sir, may I
Patra.
just ask you one question, sir?
Just a moment. Again, today's recording will be saved